Good evening. Welcome, everyone, our Ferguson Florissant family. On behalf of the board, I want to thank you all for coming out this evening. Before we begin, I would like to introduce my fellow board members, Mr. Robert Chabot, Vice President, Ms. Connie Hart, Secretary, Ms. Leslie Hogshead, Assistant Secretary. Dr. Donna Paulette Thurman will not be able to join us this evening. Jessica Ponder, Director, and Scott Eber is on his way. All right. More importantly, I would like to thank you for your feedback over the last several months. As a Berkeley graduate, I understand your passion and the fond memories we share from our days in school. As a parent in this district, I understand the desire to prepare our children for the best opportunities in life. That's what I want for my children and your children too. I think we can find a way to honor our memories and prepare our children for their future. As president of the Board of Education, I know we have been entrusted to raising the quality of our education in our schools while being fiscally responsible stewards of your financial investment as taxpayers. Last spring, the board adopted an equity resolution. We, as a board, are united in our commitment to ensuring that all of our students, so let me repeat that, all of our students, regardless of their race, wherever they live at in this district, or any other factor, that all of our students will receive an equitable and high-quality education. We are committed to providing the supports to our students so they can reach success. And compared to the other students in our district, our community, but success when compared to students across the region, the state, and this nation. Tonight's meeting is an opportunity for you to hear the results of the facilities assessments and revised options for the future of our children, our schools, and our district. You will have an opportunity to respond during this session using the digital clickers that will record everyone's response. So if you didn't receive a clicker yet, so can you just hold up your hand just to make sure that you get a clicker. Then, after that, during the breakout sessions, you will be able to have a conversation in a small group setting where you can share your voice and everyone can be heard. The facilitators will be sure your comments are shared with the board and administration. And now I would like to present to you our superintendent, Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Dr. Graves. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see each of you here tonight. We're going to dive right in. This district has a long history of community support and involvement. That's one of the factors that influenced my decision to apply for the position of superintendent of the Ferguson Florissant School District. It's been nearly a year since the first conversation in a board meeting around redistricting and subsequent the meeting we had in South Berkeley back in December of 2016. People have said publicly that the decision has been made already, and that tonight is all for show. Well, I'm here to tell you that it absolutely is not the case. The board truly has listened to all the meetings we've had from December of 2016 through April, the summer, all until up until this month, actually. The board has truly listened and has heard your passion for your schools. I know many of you have great memories of your times in our schools. Some families have lived and attended schools in this community for generations. I believe that we can find a way to balance the memories of the past while preparing our students for the future. We can preserve memories without sacrificing our children's futures. We know we can't continue business as usual if our students are to experience success in college, if they choose to go, in a career, or in life, period. The way we'll help students succeed is by focusing on the bookends that I mentioned way back, on early education and on high school transformation. Ferguson, Florissant is the birthplace of parents as teachers, and we are absolutely committed to early education. All three of the options you'll see this evening provide a free, full day, full week, early education with certified teachers for all 3 and 4-year-olds in our district. This is a huge step towards helping prepare all of our children with a strong start that will carry them all the way through high school and into life. All 3 options include opportunities to transform the way we do high school to give our students the best opportunity at success possible. At this time, I'm going to introduce Dr. Ed Humble with MGT of America Consulting Group. Dr. Humble has led the assessment that you'll hear about tonight throughout this entire process in our district, and he's done this work not only here, but also across the nation. He will share the format of the evening and the process we'll use to ensure that each one of you has an opportunity to respond. Dr. Humble.
It's my pleasure. Everybody hear this okay? It's on, and hear me okay. It's my pleasure to be here tonight, and I want to say that we do have. I have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to go all over the country and help public school districts make things better for kids, and that's my passion, and that's the passion of our firm. And it's not just me. I've got some of the other members of our team that will be speaking. I'll introduce them when they come up. But I want to congratulate this district. When Dr. Davis came up here and said that you have a history of public engagement, we do this all over the country, and it isn't often that we see the kind of passion and the kind of turnout that we're seeing here. So I applaud you for that. I'm going to take you through on this first slide here with what our process is for tonight, because we did have the opportunity to anticipate that we would have a large number of people. And this is going to be an important decision that the board makes here in a few weeks down the road. It's going to be an important decision, and we need to hear from all of you. So we're going to go through this in a kind of a system here of different ways that we're going to get your feedback, get your thoughts, get your opinions. I promise you, everything that we see is going to go into the consideration. It's going to go into the report that we end up giving to the board, and that's a commitment that we will make, because this is important, and this is a community decision to be made. So I'm doing some introductory remarks right now. Portia's going to come out and do some initial questions, because one of the ways that we get information from you is we handed you a clicker when you came in. And when Portia comes out here and takes you through that process, you'll see the results of that right here on the screen right tonight. And you'll see what this group as a whole is saying. When we get down to the end there where it says large group survey, interactive poll, that's where we'll get into some more of the in-depth questions. The early ones are going to be more of a demographic kind of a thing. We're going to get into some in-depth ones and get you thinking about different ways to look at this. It's not going to be a vote, it is to get your opinion. The key thing then, we'll have that information. None of it can be, there's no numbers on any of the clickers, we don't know, it's all anonymous, we don't know who clicked what, but we'll know what the group as a whole said. And then we want to take you to some small groups with a facilitator where you get into where everyone, because it's hard in a group this big, where everyone will have the opportunity to really get in and discuss why they answered the way they did. And that gives us good information, it gives us good analysis, and we listen to you and we can present that and give that information to the board. Between then and those two bookends and on here, we're gonna talk to you a little bit about what the process was that we've gone through. We're going to take you through all of our methodology, and I hope our team doesn't bore you to death. We did a lot of work here. We've assessed every building. We've really done a lot of work on calculating your capacities. So try to stay with us, because you need to see that. You need to see and be informed on what we found. We went and saw and toured every one of your buildings and assessed every one of your buildings. We'll take you all the way through that, then the large group survey, then the small group discussions, and then you have a room and a card, I think, when you came in. So thank you for being here. I'll be back up in a little bit. I'm going to turn it over to Portia Bates, who was my first assistant on this project. Portia and I work together on projects all over the country, and Portia's an educator, and she came from the Maryland Department of Education, and when we stole her at MGT, and she is the one, because everything starts. When we do a facility plan, it starts with educational program. People think facility plan is about facilities. It's more about education and kids. And Portia is the one that heads that whole piece of this. So with that, Portia.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Okay, so the first part that we're going to do, or the next part, is we're going to start collecting some of that feedback and information from you. So everyone has a clicker. Can you hold up the clicker? Yes, yes, yes. A couple things about your clicker. They do record the last button that you push, or your last response gets collected. So if you push it 3 times and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if it captured the correct answer, whatever you pushed last, right before we say the poll is closed, that's the one that was recorded. At the end of the presentation today, please leave your clickers in one of the boxes. There are boxes along every exit. These did cost the district money, and there are opportunities for them to use them at a different time. So it's very important, again, with the fiscal responsibility, that we make sure that we get those clickers back. And they only work for this type of presentation. We have special software and special equipment. So they won't work on your garage door. They won't work to make your children sit down and eat dinner. I've tried it. So they're really just for this presentation. So let's go ahead and get started, and this way you can get an idea about how this process works. And as Dr. Humble said later on in the presentation, I'll be coming back and asking some really in-depth questions, okay? So question number 1, what best describes you? Current student, parent of current student, community member, employee, or district partner? And then we get some wait time, and you can start clicking. Christy over here is watching your responses pop up to make sure you're getting them all in. They're coming in, okay. And then you'll love this automatic polling. Okay, let's close the poll. All right, so we have a lot of parents of current students and employees here, but it's good to see some community members as well and district partners, okay? Next question. We've heard that pre-K through 2nd grade is going to be a big discussion, and is a big discussion in this district. Do you have a pre-K to 2nd grade student currently? 1 for yes, 2 for no. Yes, okay, I see. We do have some parents in here with students in some of the lower grades, but we have a lot of parent participation across the board, I see. That's excellent. Next question. 3rd through 5th grade students. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Throughout this great dance, but we really want to get an idea of who was in the room and who provided opinions. 6th through 8th grade. Middle schoolers. That was where I lived. I love middle school. All right? All right. And then I'm pretty sure that this one will capture high school. 9th through 12th grade. Okay? All right. So a good percentage of high school parents. Are you a graduate of Ferguson, Florida? School District. Do we have a lot of graduates in the house tonight? That's right, be proud, be proud. Be proud. Where you're educated and your commitment, that's important, that's important. We're all together, okay? All right, so a good amount. Good amount? Next question. Are you a resident? You're here, you're concerned, this is your community. Are you a current resident of Ferguson Florissant School District? Because we might have some visitors, that's okay too. All right. So most of the folks, a lot of graduates, a lot of community members. So, as Dr. Davis shared, there have been many meetings to get to this point, to kind of make sure that there's a full discussion around restructuring. Is this your first, second, third, fourth, or fifth meeting? We have a decent amount of folks who have been to several, but mostly first and second meeting. All right, so we're going to make sure we provide you with some good information tonight. Okay, so that's again just the first portion of our questions for the evening. We're going to be coming back to you with more questions after we give you some additional information. But we did want to take the time to talk to you about the methodology for this project. We have been here since about March. Have done a lot of work, walked every building, talked to every administrator in the building, had lots of discussions with community members. There are lots of feelings about how schools are, how they may need to be restructured. So we began by coming and meeting with the district. We had the facility and site inventory, meaning we didn't just look at the inside of buildings, but really walked the play fields and took a look at how things were on the outside as well. An educational program review, which I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. Enrollment, capacity, and utilization. So we conducted a full analysis of enrollment, capacity, and utilization of every single building and the district as a whole. Okay? Facility condition assessments, we're going to have our DMA partners talk to you a little bit more about that. And then, of course, the educational suitability assessments. That's where we are. We have not reported out on restructuring options. We're getting information from you, okay? So we're not there and nowhere near a final report until we get that information, all right? So, a master plan is a big deal, right? It can involve a lot of money, a lot of commitment when you're looking at all of your facilities throughout a district. So before we make any recommendations, we're taking a look at what your educational program goals are. Ferguson Florissant has some very special things they want to do here. We need to understand the context for this district. The data, again, walked every building, looked at your demographics, capacity utilization, pulled all of that data together so that we had clean, third-party information. Next, people, interviews. We have attended quite a few of your community meetings, and now we're here. And finally, the plan. Okay, the educational program review. Please know that when we look at the condition of a building from an educational suitability perspective, we are looking at it by instructional area, right? So there are certain things that the gym needs to have, the art room, the cafeteria. We're looking at those spaces based on what's needed to fully implement the program. So before we made those decisions, we created an individual guide for Ferguson Florissant and then scored accordingly. That's very important, and we're going to come back to that.
So, Portia took you through the the key thing to putting any kind of a facility plan together, and here it's restructuring, and it's got some right-sizing components to it. Any of it starts with the educational program. What do we want to do in the buildings? That's what it starts with, okay? But there certainly are other components to it. There certainly is the facility assessments. We don't do just one facility assessment. People think of a facility assessment as building condition, and that is does the roof leak? What's the condition of the mechanical systems? You know, is it always too hot or always too cold? Is it all of those? What's the condition of the walls and the windows? And all of those things. That is important to know, because if those aren't, if the roof's leaking every day, it's pretty hard to conduct school. And so that's very important. And we have a score on every building and a report on every building for facility condition. But we don't stop there. We then do educational suitability. And what that means, as Portia was getting at, is that does this facility have the appropriate spaces to support the educational program that Portia met with your staff and your district and came up with the standards for? So in other words, if we walk into a classroom and science is being taught in there, is it a science lab? Does it have all the appropriate things, or is it really just a classroom with science on the door? Okay, and you wouldn't be the only place that those kinds of things happen, but they do. It's the same thing with all the different kind of, is PE appropriate? Is the music classes, are the music classes in the appropriate spaces? That's the educational suitability. We need that. We need to know that to overlay what's the best way to organize your district. Where are there some changes that are needed? So the educational suitability. Then we assess the technology readiness, and what that is, we're not in counting computers or counting smart boards or anything like our projectors. We are looking at the infrastructure of the building. Does the facility have the infrastructure to support the technology we want for our kids as we prepare our kids to live and work in the world we all live in? So is the infrastructure in place? And that's what that measures on that technology readiness. And finally, there's the site. And that's everything around the building. That's what's the condition of the ball fields, the playgrounds, the bus driveways, the fences, the walkways around the school, all of those things, the lighting. What's the condition of all of the things around on the site, but not the building itself? So we do all 4 of those assessments, and I'm going to show you the results of those here in just a few minutes. Okay? We roll that all into a combined score, and that's for the purposes of prioritization, so that we can say, okay, here, this school, in terms of all those different assessments and all those pieces, because every one of them is important, here's where this school scores versus this school, and here's why. And I'll show you those scores here and how they work. The other piece of a school, the condition, all 4 pieces of the condition is very important. The other piece of it is capacity. And capacity is usually more complex than people think, because I'm going to take you back to the educational program. The capacity of a building depends on what you want to do in that building. And for instance, I like to just give an example. You know, you'll see, and I always talk about my architect friends. I got one that's going to come out here in just a minute. But an architect, they do a wonderful job of designing buildings. And they'll say, this building has got a capacity of, this is an elementary school, it's a capacity of 500 students. I just grab that out of the air. Well, if I'm the principal of that building and I change what was supposed to be a 3rd grade room to maybe a special education room, the capacity of the building changes because you won't put as many special ed kids in that room. So it changes the capacity. So what the program is makes a difference on the capacity of the building. If you have music classes in the elementary school and you take the students out of Mrs. Brown's 3rd grade room and take them to the music room, it doesn't add any capacity because you didn't put the students back into the other room. And so all of those factors, so it gets to be complex. And that's where I hope I don't bore you too much, but I've got to show you because this is a right-sizing project. And we need to know that the capacity is different. If we were going to use a school for as Dr. Davis said, the bookends, we're going to use it for a PK3 versus a high school, obviously, but even if it was a PK2 versus a 3 through 5 school, or whatever that configuration might be, the capacity could be different. So I want to kind of set that stage. The methodology we use to determine the capacity. First of all, that's what I just was explaining. It's a decision, not a definition. It's what do you want to do with that building, okay? It is the programming use of the school that determines the capacity, okay? Program drives the use of individual rooms. Grade configuration drives it. That's a big deal here, because usually your class loads are smaller in the primary grades than maybe they are in the upper grades. And so that drives part of what the capacity, how many students should be in that building, okay? Square footage is appropriate, but it doesn't, when you see, you go into a lot of public buildings, you'll see the fire marshal's thing. It says the maximum number of people in this building is this, okay? Don't ever think that's the capacity for that building, especially when it's a school. That's the number, and that's for the fire marshal, that's the right thing to know. It's based on how much square footage and how many exits are there, because that's all about, can we get everybody out and safe if there's an emergency. For our purposes, it's educational program. It's a different measure altogether, okay? Go ahead. Just a few things. Because if you have schools that are overcrowded or schools that have excess space, there's things that can happen. None of this is taken from, this is currently happening in Ferguson, Florida. So don't think that's the case. This is just things that can happen. If a school is underutilized, meaning that we see the capacity is 500 and there's only 300 students in it. Okay? Things that can happen because of that is you're going to limit the program offerings because you don't have enough students for all of the different things you want to do in that building and all the things that you would be able to have and get more students have programs for. Okay? Maintenance is often deferred because you're not really using part of that building. Okay? Increased operational costs often occur. Limited extracurricular opportunities. That's just some examples of what happens. On the other hand, if a school is overcrowded, my 500 student school has got 700 students in it, okay? Here's the things that happen, okay? Programs aren't offered in optimal spaces. We go all over the country and we see schools that are overcrowded. And what happens is that you'll have some classrooms in what should have been a resource room, or you'll have classrooms meeting in hallways. Lots of times we add portables. That seems okay, but when we add portables, the core spaces become, the number of restrooms become an issue, the size of the gym and the cafeteria and all of those kinds of things. Crowded hallways, challenges with supervision. I mentioned the restrooms thing, the number of lunch periods that in a cafeteria if you have an overcrowded school. All of a sudden we've got kids starting lunch at 10:30 in the morning and not being done until 1:30 in the afternoon, and all those things start to work. So we want to get to that good place where we're at. I'm going to show you the definition of good place here in just a few minutes. We want to get there because that's what makes the program work, makes things right for kids. Kids are in a comfortable environment and kids learn better. And there's a lot of data to support that. Go ahead, Christy. So I'm going to go through this kind of fast. If any of you, I'll leave my contact information for anybody and be happy to go into detail if somebody really wants it. But to calculate that capacity starts with, what are the guidelines? How many students would we put in a pre-kindergarten room? How many students would we put in a grade K2? These are the numbers that we used for this school district. Those are the numbers after having discussions here. How many students? There's also a scheduling factor, and I'm going to show you that when I show you the example. So we start with that. Then let's go to the next one, okay? This is now how we actually calculate. And this is, I told you earlier, this was just some examples. This is McClure South Berkeley High School. This is our analysis of MSB. So the first thing we do is that we count the number of classrooms. Well, we think there are 37 general classrooms. This is what we found when we walked that building in inventory. Here we had that space inventory on the work plan. There are 5 science rooms. There's 1 vocational room, 3 music rooms, and so on down, okay? Then, how many students per classroom based on those standards? We multiply the number of classrooms by that, and then we get that capacity for each of those different program areas. It's based on the program. You add that all up, that would say the capacity of McClure South Berkeley is 1,446 kids, and I know if the principal from MSB is here, they'd say, oh, how would you put 1,400 in there? Well, it's because we have to apply that scheduling factor. Because kids don't just divide themselves all the time into neat little groups of 28 and 26, okay? We've got scheduling to deal with, we've got prep periods, remember I talked about sometimes one classroom won't be filled in when students go to another place, and it's very common standard around the country for a high school to use a 70%. So we think the appropriate capacity of MSP is 1,012 students. That's how we came to that number. So I want you to know, because we did that for every single school in this district, because that became the overlay for the three options that Dr. Davis has laid out. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay. This one I'm going to go through kind of fast because it gets more complicated than that even. Because in laying the overlay for this school district, it said what school would fit best for this program. Some of your schools are underutilized, some of them are over, but some of them are underutilized. And what happens then is that spaces start to get filled up. I'm a former principal myself. I'd never let an empty classroom happen. I'd have something going on and then they get filled up. So we had to decide for each of the different grade levels, what's the appropriate number of spaces? So we said for a PK2 school, we think it should have one science room. So if we go back and look at that, and because we're going to overlay, we're going to say, should we use this school for a PK2? That's what this overlay means, okay? Then if it didn't have a science room, then we're going to take one away from the other calculations and say it should have. It should have one, same thing for 3 through 5, and 3 through 8 should have 2, and so on. The yellows and the whites are because where we stated that in that educational suitability guide. As I said, this gets pretty complex, and in some places it was just how we counted them, so we came up with the number. I wanted this slide up here. I hesitated, but I wanted it because I wanted you to know the depth that this goes to really determine what facilities are the best to use. Okay, go ahead and move on, Christine. So now we're to what's the result of all this. Okay? So we score everything and we give it a color coding. And on the top is the assessment for the scores. Each of those 4 different assessments we did plus the combined score. And if it's over 90%, it's in excellent or light good condition. That's a school you want to just keep on using, okay? If it's in that lighter green, in the 80 to 89, that's a very good building. To score over 90, it has to be a like new building. 80 to 89 means that's a good building. There may be a few tweaks, things that need to be tweaked a little bit from when we read the reports and you have that detailed report on every building. It's a good building. Those that fall in the 70 to 79, those are buildings you want to concentrate on because they're usually pretty good. But there's some things that if you don't maintain them, if you don't make them educationally suitable, they're going to continue to deteriorate, and all of a sudden they're going to be 60s. Okay, and so those are the buildings that you want to take a close look at. And should we invest in these buildings? Okay, when you get to the poor and the unsatisfactory place on that, you need to start talking about is the best thing for us to continue to use that building and fix it, or is the best thing to replace that building? Where is our money better spent? And this gives you kind of an overview and a color coding to look at that. On the utilization, you have a red at the top and the bottom. If you're over 110%, which means you got more than 10% capacity of the school is 500, and you got more than 550 students in there, that's overutilized. Those negative things that we talked about start to happen. So that's red. If it's in 96 to 110, it's approaching inadequate. Let's watch it. The reason it can go over 100 is that sometimes there's bubbles that go through. And then that's appropriate use for portables and things. If it's not a bubble, if it's going to stay that way, then let's fix it. Down below, the 70 to 79 is approaching inefficient. And if you have less than 70%, excuse me, if my 500 student building was, I guess that's 35 students less, if it has, less than 70% of the capacity in there, you've got empty spaces and you're paying to heat them, you're paying to maintain them. So that's a red. The sweet spot is to be in that 80 to 95 because that says you're efficiently using a building, but you still have some flexibility. Remember, the program will change things and you still have some flexibility to do that. So that's where we want to end up. All right, let's move on. Now I'm going to show you some scores, and we start with the building condition of the site. So at our firm at MGT, we're educators, and so we always have partners. Our partner, really around the country, but happens to be an architect and engineering firm right here in St. Louis, David Mason Associates, that has been a partner with us on this in literally school districts across the country and it was nice being right here in their hometown. And David Mason, David's his dad, Taylor Mason, is going to explain what the scores mean on the condition and site.
Thanks. Good evening. As Ed mentioned, my name is Taylor Mason with David Mason and Associates, headquartered here in St. Louis, but we work with MGT all over the country. It's been a pleasure to work with them here in St. Louis on this project, so we can actually make a difference and help them all make some very interesting decisions that are going to help affect the lives of the children here. But our role in this project as the architects and engineers to support the data collection was really going out and being the feet on the ground, inspecting and providing all the data back up for every single one of the facilities. Not just the actual buildings themselves, but also the site conditions, as Ed mentioned. So when you start looking at the building condition itself, we're looking at everything from the windows to the flooring to the roofs to the HVAC systems. And these are really in-depth looks at what's the general condition. And we're using a system called the BASIS system, Building Assessment System, which we provide to all of our engineers and architects that are actually on the grounds. And they're providing this data based on predetermined criteria that's been developed over a number of years from across the country. So we are benchmarking your buildings against buildings from all over the country and different projects that we've been involved in. So if you take a look at that, we actually, when we go through the building condition assessment, we get low scores and high scores, and then we develop the average for across the district. And you can see what some of those averages are. And I've got to tell you, from a building condition standpoint, you all are actually in pretty good shape. There are some outliers there, no question. But when you look across the board from an average perspective, you all look like you're doing pretty darn well at maintaining your facilities compared to other school districts that we go visit, where there are a lot of other problems that we see. But then we have the site, and when we start looking at the site conditions, we're looking at everything from ADA compliance to the sidewalks to parking lots, as Ed mentioned, the playgrounds and facilities, the sports and athletic complexes. And we're coming up with a score based on the same type of criteria, the predetermined criteria that we go through with the actual building condition assessments as well. So you can take a look from elementary, middle school, high school, and others, and see what those averages look like. But we're taking all this data, extrapolating that across the district, and then MGT is going through and actually tailoring those numbers and marrying those up with the actual scores from the program utilization capacity. So that's our role in the project. And working with MGT, we've been able to come through here and spend a lot of time and really get to know your buildings. So it's been a pleasure. We appreciate the opportunity. We're just happy to be a part of something that we think is going to help impact the lives of a lot of children.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so the next slide now. Remember, we had four different assessments. This is the suitability and the technology. The suitability scores are a little lower. You would expect that because your buildings are aging. Some that are relatively good, but your buildings overall are aging. And so they weren't built for the programs we want for our kids today. They were built for education a number of years back. So you would expect that you're going to see some scores there that might be a little bit lower. And in fact, that we did. You have one elementary school that scored as low as 52. We need to address that. The school really doesn't have the appropriate spaces to support the program. Now, please don't take that as that's a bad place for kids, because that doesn't mean that at all, because teachers, I see teachers and administrators and paraprofessionals and all of the staff at schools every day are doing everything that they can to overcome sometimes having to teach science in a room that wasn't really designed for that. Think of what happens if we get it so that it is very suitable. And so that's why we do these assessments. You scored, you have one middle school of 69, but then in the yellows, and the high school's in the yellows, the other schools, that's only marked 20. There's one school across there. So that's why you'll see those numbers all the same all the way across. The technology, remember, that is the infrastructure. This says you've put some emphasis on it, and you've put some investment in that, because your schools really do have the infrastructure. If you want to have, and you do have some good technology programs going on, and the infrastructure is there supporting. You see lots of things. There's always some anomalies, okay? Now, don't switch yet, Christy, because the next slide, the next two slides are going to be, here's the scores, school by school, okay? you're going to get frustrated because you're going to want to find your school that you're interested or your two schools you're interested in, okay? We're going through this kind of fast. In the small groups, there'll be copies of this, okay? There'll be copies of these 2 pages, so you'll be able to look at that. So don't get, because we need to move through this. In fact, I'm probably already taking too much time. So we're going to go through the next one. Go ahead, Christine, go to the next one. These are all the elementary schools. There's the condition score, suitability score, technology score, and ground score. Remember that the grounds is sites, it's the same thing. Remember I said earlier, we do a combined score for the purposes of prioritization. You'll see on the top of combined score it says 50, 30, 10, 10. That means that in order across, that combined score applied 50% weight to the condition, 30% weight to the suitability, and 10% weight to each of the technology and grounds. So you can look on there and see, there's a couple of reds, there's some reds in the suitability that show up. There's a lot of yellows. And that says, with the age of, when I look at that, with the age of your buildings, you've done a good job of keeping them up. It's time to make some investments, okay? Go ahead to the secondary schools, Kristen. There's the secondary schools, and you can see where they are. For again, for those same scores all the way across. Very good. And you don't have to memorize that now. I can see lots of cell phones taking pictures, and that's okay. But we'll have copies of this in the small group breakouts. All right, let's move on. Remember those option overlays? I said that we took this now because I didn't show you the results of the capacity, because it depends on where we are putting this. It depends on what we're going to use a school for as to what its capacity is. That's why I wanted to go into that explanation. But things that we consider in looking at making some suggestions, and all we do is make suggestions, recommendations, and give it to Dr. Davis and to the school board to make decisions from. But we considered grade level configuration, and we considered a lot of them. Not all of them are even used, but we said, what are all the possibilities? So we did it that way. We considered geographic location. We don't want to end up with all the schools in one part of the school district. So we needed to consider that. We considered the impact on transportation. Considered natural boundaries. And I see interstate highways as a natural boundary, and other major thoroughfares or other natural boundaries, and which schools make sense where. We certainly considered the boundary lines. Geographic anomalies. Holman is far to the south. Griffith is far to the east. Wedgwood's far to the north. That serves a purpose in a district that is spread out. Okay? So we needed to consider those things. Closeness of PK schools. If we're going to do the PK and 3-5 model, is there some sense to, here's where this group goes, can they go as a group to the next level? Does that make sense? We considered that, okay? Certainly considered the suitability conditions, site scores, all those scores we talked about. Okay? Which schools are the better? We considered the combined score, and finally that impact on the capacity. So those are all the things that went into those overlays to come up with how do these overlays fit over the options that Dr. Davis has presented, and that a lot of you saw in the earlier meetings that went on. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn this back over to Dr. Davis.
Thank you. So I'm going to jump right in and talk a little bit about what the options are. And so when we presented back in April of this year, we actually gave you 3 options to look at. They changed not a whole lot, some. What we didn't give you back then were the schools. We couldn't do that until we got this assessment. This assessment has been done. We know what our scores are in our schools. One of the good things about having this data now is that you saw yourself that most of our schools are yellow. And what yellow really means for us fiscally is that we have some time. Though most of our buildings were built in the 50s, but they've been maintained pretty good. To have just one school that's red throughout like that, and that's Mark Twain, then that tells us that we've done a decent job at keeping our buildings up. They're not going to last forever, but we have a little time. So that weighs in, and you may see some of that in just a little bit. I just want to give you some enrollment patterns, just so that you can see where we've been back in 2008 to where we are today. Today we are certainly in 2018. And we're here at about 10,500 students. That's not including early ed. In the next couple of years, we expect, based on what the history has been, that there will continue to be a decline without drastic improvement, which is what we've been working on in our schools, is looking at not just structure, because these are structures I'm going to talk about, but we got to change practice, like what's happening in classrooms. and that students are getting quality content on a daily basis so that they're ready for college and career. So the next slide, I'm going to get right into the options. Here's option one. What I'm going to do first is talk specifically about option one. I'm going to talk about the pre-K-8. When I talk about pre-K early ed, so I know that this is a shift because most schools in the country are funded from K-12. Missouri has a little, we're lucky in the sense that the state now gives us some reimbursement if we educate some of our early ed students sooner. That means 3 and 4 year olds when we're talking about early ed and pre-K. So we can begin bringing in more of our 3 and 4 year olds. But let me say this, that when we talk about early education, and that's a bookend, we're specifically talking about our child and making sure our children are developing, right? So we focus on the child and not the subject matter in early ed, right? Because by the time they get to first grade and second grade, our students have the development opportunities. What we do know, and Joy Ralph did this when she was here time and again, that what we do know is that students who go through our early ed programs, that when you look at math scores and you look at ELA scores, especially when they get to third grade and all throughout, our kids always who go through early ed in our program always outperform students who do not. That's a clear sign to us that we need to make sure we're providing early education for as many students in our community as possible. So option one is this. Here's the pre-K through 8th grade option. We divide it through 270. So just think about 270. And so our pre-K schools, what we did was we put the schools that have, this word may sound, not familiar to a lot of people, but it's called a cafeteria. That is a space that has a cafeteria in some parts of the day, it's a gym in some parts of the day, and it could be an auditorium, all in the same space. We have several of those in our district. And so that's important because as we think about where we put our students in these options that we have to consider all of that, right? And Ed talked about it a minute ago, that space and how we use that space is critically important. So our pre-K2 schools are, for all the students who are in pre-K2, that means 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, all the way through our second grade, Commons Lane, Duchesne, and Parker Road. Those are the schools north of 270 that will have pre-K2 students, okay? Let's go to the southern part. Now the southern part of our district, south of 270, is larger. We have more schools right now. You count all the schools. We have more schools below 270. We have more students. So then certainly we have to consider all of that when we're talking about how we place our schools. Up top you saw 3 pre-K2 schools. Here you see 4, right? The 4 schools are Bermuda, Central, here's Holman over here. This is sort of on the left side there, on the other side of the highway. And then up north here, close to 270 is Walnut Road. Those are the 4 schools that will be slated as pre-K2 schools in option 1, okay? So now, the blue squares you see are when students leave the pre-K2 schools, they slide right into the 3-5 schools. Now I want to make a point here, this is really important. So across this country, Missouri and every state, testing begins in what grade? 3rd grade. It begins in 3rd grade. This is critically important because if we're talking about pre-K2 schools, that means that principals of pre-K2 schools can focus on that child development that we talked about a minute ago and not the subject matter, right? So when students get to 3rd grade, we can program it like we need to. When students get to 3rd grade, we give them an opportunity to get ready for it. Right? And we don't want students to leave 2nd grade without being ready for 3rd grade. That's one of the reasons we have so many students failing by the time they get to the first time they take the state exam. And so we're trying to put some barriers there to make sure we catch our students so that they have the skills they need, the reading skills and the math skills they need by the time they get to 3rd grade. The 3rd grade schools north of 270 would be Combs, Halls Ferry, and Robinwood. Those would be the 3 schools north of 270, Combs, Halls Ferry, and Robinwood. So students would feed right into that, okay? Next slide, south of 270, we would have 3 schools here where all of our students would feed into. We don't have the boundaries yet. That may come up in small groups. The boundaries, so Jim, who is the Director of Transportation, can look at every student in our district. And we have a map that can show you all the way down to who's a boy and who's a girl. And we know where every student is, what their address is. So as we get a program around where the districts are within each school, we try to make sure we balance that based on the capacity data that Ed talked about a minute ago. So at south of 270, those 3 schools that are 3-5, go to the next slide for me. South. Yeah, there you go. So South End would be Berkeley. Berkeley Middle School now would be a 3-5 school. Lee Hamilton would also be a 3-5 school. And then you move over here, and that's Griffith. And Griffith would be a 3-5 school as well. Okay? Now, the middle school is a little bit different. So let's jump into that. Middle school is a little bit different. So we would have an anomaly. We would have 2 what we call middle school complexes. Okay? So we certainly have already here our 6-8 STEAM school that remains where it is. We would have 2 6th grade centers in the district. North of 270, every student who lives north of 270 in 6th grade will go to Wedgwood. Okay, and then they would be right into Cross Keys. Okay, that's a really good programming opportunity for us. One of the things I often hear from parents sometimes is that the students may be bored because they're not being challenged, right? And so it gives us an opportunity for students who are in 6th grade but already ready for Algebra 1 to be able to program them up to that 8th grade right across the yard there. So students in 6th grade would go north of 270, would go to Wedgwood, and in 7th and 8th grade they would go to Cross Keys. All right, south of 270, I may be moving a little fast for you, Christy. Because I think I've jumped ahead a little bit. So what we have here in this map, 6th grade, south of 270, all students in 6th grade down here would go to JW. Okay, we looked at the number of students we have. JW is one of the better schools in terms of facility scores. All 6th graders south of 270 would go to JW. We have about 800 students, and that varies. 750 to 6th grade probably has a little bit more than most other grades, so about 850 or 60. But we have on the average about 800 students per grade level. So when you think about 6th grade, you have about 4 here and 4 there, based on this model in particular. Okay? All right, next slide. So, and then students would leave JW in 6th grade, and they would move right into Ferguson Middle School. Just a couple of numbers real quickly. Cross Keys has the capacity for 7th and 8th grade to house about 1,200 students. We would have about 700 some odd students there. In Ferguson Middle School, for students when they leave 6th grade from JW and would go to Ferguson Middle, we have about the capacity of about 900 students for Ferguson Middle School. So those are our pre-K through 8 options for option 1. Now, let me say this. This is really important. In all of our options 1, options 2 and 3, pre-K is virtually the same. Where you're going to see the variation is in the high school, okay? And the lines drawn of which high school is which, okay? We also have up here a legend that's going to specifically show you our repurposed schools. The plan will come in terms of what those schools may be used for. The board will decide that as we build out the master plan, okay? Great. So here is option 1 for the high school. Option 1 for the high school, this line right here is St. Anthony. So St. Anthony is what he called the geographic divider. So all students who are north of St. Anthony, that is correct, right? Yes. North would be McClure North. Okay? Between here and this is Airport Chamber, I call McClure the sandwich. So between St. Anthony and Airport Chamber would be McClure. And then students who are south of Airport Chamber would be McClure South Berkeley. Okay? Let me give you a couple of quick numbers. In option 1, the largest school then will become McClure. It would cause us to shift some students, because right now McClure South Berkeley has about 460 students. So the new numbers will be in option 1. We'd have about 1,050 students in North. We'd have about 1,100 students in McClure. And we'd have about 800 students in McClure South Berkeley. We have about 3,000 students at the high school level, just a little bit better than 3,000 students at the high school level. All right, next slide. The innovation school changes. So right now, we know that Mark Twain is the only red school we have. So the board's going to have to make some decisions about what we do with Mark Twain. Right now, it's just on our repurpose list, and no decision has been determined yet. Cool Valley would become our innovation school. We have students who go to our alternative program. We take an alternative and turn it on its head. Because every student who has a need isn't a student who has a discipline problem. We have students who are parents. We have students who have sensory issues. We have students who have a lot of different issues. And so Cool Valley will become our innovation school. In fact, there's some really good programming around what innovation work can look like so we can address the needs of the students. in the whole student, in the whole child. So Blue Valley in every option here will become the innovation school. And then in option 1, next slide, so then both would become the 9-12 STEAM school in option 1. Okay? And the repurposed school, the repurposed buildings would be the administration building, which we've already vacated, airport, and Mark Twain. So those are on the repurposed list, and the board will have to decide what happens there. All right? We're to option 2. Option 2 is pretty much the same pre-K through 8th grade as the other ones were. So I'll go through those pretty quickly. Same through at top, Commons Lane, Duchesne, Parker Road, south of 270, Bermuda, Central, Holman, and Walnut Road. Okay? You can go to the 351s. North again, same thing, Combs, Halls Ferry, Robinwood, and then south of 270 for 35 would be Berkeley, Griffin, and Lee Hamilton. Now, here's the high school piece. STEAM is still, STEAM Academy is there. The high school piece is a little bit different in option 2. It's the same thing we presented when we gave you the options back in April. Okay, we would have 2 high schools. One would be every student who lives north of 270 in option 2. Every student who lives north of 270 would go to Blue North. And every student who lives south of 270 in option 2 would go to McClure. Okay? And then McClure South Berkeley will become the 9-12 STEAM school. That's the same as we presented when we presented back in April. The innovation school remains the same. The innovation school will still be Cool Valley. And the pre-K-8 are all the same as well. The repurposed buildings here would be the admin building, airport, Mark Twain, and then both would be a repurposed building. So the board would have to make the decisions about what to do there, because you remember in option 1, both was a 9-12 STEAM. Okay? Go to option 3. 3 options, same 3. 3 options. The pre-K grade is the same school. Commons Lane, Duchesne, Parker Road. South is Bermuda, Central, Holman, Walnut Grove. 3-5, same thing. North of 270, Combs, Halls Ferry, Robinwood. And then south of 270 for those same 3 schools would be Berkeley, would become Berkeley Elementary, Griffin, and Lee Hamilton. Okay? In option 3, we would have some different repurposed schools. We would have 1 new high school that every student in the district would go to. MSB is in such great shape. MSB would be the 9-12 STEAM in option 3. And then on our repurposed list, innovation school is still Cool Valley. But on the repurposed list, if you get to that, then not only will the admin building and airport and Mark Twain, but also McClure will be on the repurposed list, and as well as McClure North and both. Okay? So that would be option 3. Here's an easy way to remember it. Option 1 has 3 high schools, a traditional. Option 2 has 2 high schools, and option 3 has 1 high school. Okay? Pre-K, pretty much the same throughout all of those options. Okay? Next one. Is that your portion? All right.
All right, it's time to collect some feedback from you. I know you're ready. I'm watching your faces. I know you're ready. And we are still going to small groups. For my folks who came in a little bit later and you didn't hear the information about the clickers, 2 things. Number 1, the last button that you push before we close the polls, that's the one that's recorded. And 2, when you leave, please make sure that you drop your clickers off in one of the boxes at the doors. This has been an investment by the district. We want to make sure that we conserve those. All right, here we go. Number 9, after listening, what were you most surprised by? And I know we have to run through these. Physical condition, how those scores showed up, educational suitability, where we landed with capacity and utilization. The options weren't surprised at all. We're watching those scores come in. And remember, you will be able to discuss things fully, deeply in those small group discussions. We're trying to get you to that next part, okay? lot of folks weren't surprised at all. We're surprised at all, okay? We will discuss that. But we did hear a little bit of surprise about the options that were presented because there had been a couple of changes, all right? Next. Ferguson Floors and Facilities provides an environment supportive of 21st century teaching and learning, okay? Let me tell you a little bit more about that question. 21st century teaching and learning is having an opportunity to connect with the world, innovative programs, exciting CTE opportunities to get you prepared for work or whatever type of academic experience you'd like to have. Opportunities to work in big common spaces with kids and different types of facilities that help to support that. So are those or some of those things happening here? You agree? Strongly agree? Disagree? Okay. Almost there. She's watching. This is like election night, like so intense. All right, so yes, a lot of good things going on here. There were some folks who disagreed or strongly disagreed, but we had some folks who believe that some things are moving in that right direction as well. We'll talk about that in the group. Next, please. This is about facilities. Do they provide an equitable educational opportunity amongst all schools? Or is there a feeling that some schools or some areas might have schools that are in better condition or provide more opportunities than others? Think about it. Strongly agree, disagree? Would love to hear your thoughts about that in small groups. All right, poll closed. Disagree. That's definitely one that we need to get into. A lot of folks disagree or strongly disagree. Okay? Next question. Which of the following programs would you consider to be the highest needs as far as priorities concerned in the district? Right? So if you know there's going to be an investment in possible dollars or possible instructional focus, which area should receive that focus? And you're going to get an opportunity to make another choice too, so don't feel too torn. But which one do you feel is the highest need? Okay? A couple more seconds. Close the poll. All right, that means a lot of people are excited about some of the options that you heard tonight too. Okay? We want to hear a little bit more about that excitement, right? When you're in the room, talk to us a little bit more about what particular elements of that get you that excited and make you most excited. And for those who looked at some other areas, we want to delve into those as well. All right? All right, so for right side, this is looking at the entire district. The most important element to consider in the development of this plan, we will be providing recommendations for. Should we be looking at the physical condition? Fiscal considerations, and we know those are very real. Every district has them. Equitable programming opportunities or specialized program opportunities. Really interested to see where you land here. All right. Equitable programming opportunities. All right. Excellent. Let's move on. I'm trying to rush you through because I want you to have a chance to have some of those good discussions in the group. Now, that was the first one. You were kind of forced into a choice, right? This is the second time. What's the second most important thing? Yes? Oh, I can? Oh. No problem. I'll read through all of it. Thank you for giving us that feedback. Okay, the second most important element to consider in the development of a restructuring plan is 1, improving the physical condition of educational facilities. 2, managing financial considerations. 3, providing equitable program opportunities. 4, providing specialized program opportunities. And 5 is other. Okay, wow. Yes. All right, yep, a little bit, kind of some differing opinions, definitely worthy of a discussion. Next one. The most important characteristic that a school should have to help students prepare for a successful future is 1, range of educational programs. 2, extracurricular activities. 3, convenient location. And 4, specialized program opportunities. 5, other. Christy's watching the numbers roll. Okay. All right, range of educational programs. Okay, next one. We're almost done, guys. The second most, again, sometimes you're forced to choose your top choice, but this gives you another one. The second most important characteristic that a school should have to help students prepare for a successful future is 1, range of educational programs. 2, extracurricular activities. 3, convenient location. 4, specialized program opportunities. And 5 is other. So your second best choice. All right. Specialized program opportunities. We want to hear about some of those specialized programs that you'd like to see in a small group. All right. 17. 3 restructuring options were presented in the large group presentation. Go. This time, we want to hear your feedback. At this time, my most preferred option is option 1. That's number 1. Option 2. It's number 2. 3 is option 3. 4, I need additional information before determining. I still have questions, all right? I'm still a little confused about how it works. 5, no opinion. I just waiting to see these numbers. 4. Remember, the last answer you push is the one that's recorded? All right. 50% for option 1. However, we do have some perspectives and some choices for option 2 as well. Folks still need more information, so still more discussion to be had here. Oh, here we go. Second choice. 3 restructuring options were presented in the large group presentation. At this time, my second most preferred option is. So if you didn't choose the first one, like if you made a second choice, which one would it be? Option 1, number 1, 2, option 2, 3, option 3, 4, I need additional information, and 5 other. We really like to collect feedback in this one. Are the numbers still coming in? Okay. So it looks like folks can see, have some interest in discussing option 2, and there's still a lot of requests for information as well. All right? 19, I think this is the last one. What do you like most about Ferguson Florissant School District? It's your school district. 1, our diversity. 2, our educational programs. 3, our extracurricular programs. 4, innovative opportunities for our students. Or 5, I have a different thought that I will share in small groups. Fun times in those small groups. Fun times are about to be had, huh? Almost done? Well, let's go talk. All right, I believe that that's our last question. So it's time for small groups. Let me give you a couple of, hold on. Please, for those of you who aren't waiting for small groups, please turn in your clickers. This district has made a pretty significant investment and they can use those at other events. It's very important. Thank you for your